The city didn't look like a battlefield from a distance. From the ridge line, under a sky the color of bleached bone, it still had the outline of life. A grid of streets, rows of low buildings, a minaret rising like a finger pointing at a god who'd stopped listening. If you squinted, you could almost pretend there were markets and traffic and kids playing soccer in alleys. Up close, it was something else entirely. Windows were punched out. Doors hung open. Walls wore black scars where fire had crawled and died. The air held a constant taste of dust and old smoke, as if the city was still exhaling the last months of violence even after the shooting moved on. Petty Officer Second Class Lena Mercer moved through it with her head down and her mind awake. She was the team's medic. SEALs called it Doc, even when Doc wasn't your name, and she carried that title the way some people carried religion. In her pack were tourniquets, chest seals, syringes, needles, bandages, and the small, brutal tools that turned chaos into minutes. Minutes were everything. The men called her Angel. It started as a joke, the kind that could have gone sideways in a unit built on hard edges and harder humor. But it didn't, because Angel wasn't about her face, though she had the kind of calm beauty that made strangers forget how to breathe. It was about her hands. Her hands didn't hesitate. They didn't shake. They did the work like prayer, quiet, precise, relentless. She'd stopped counting the number of times she'd been elbow deep in blood while someone screamed her name like it was the only word they knew. She'd stopped counting the times she'd stared into a man's eyes and told him he was going to be fine while her mind calculated whether fine was possible. Fine, Elena had learned, was a negotiation. Today's negotiation was called Karbala Sector, but no one used the name out loud. Names made places real. Real places made people think about politics and borders and history. The team didn't care about any of that. They cared about the street in front of them. Commander Blake, Hawk, Mallory led the element through the narrow alley, as if the air itself might bite. He was the kind of leader who didn't waste words. His hand signals were sharp, his movement smooth, his eyes always doing math. Senior Chief, Rook, Callahan took the rear. Thick, silent, a man built like a door and twice as stubborn. Two other operators, Jester and Dune, moved between them, weapons up, scanning. Lena stayed slightly off-center, close enough to reach anyone in a heartbeat. That was her place. They were halfway through a daylight sweep, moving toward a block that had once been a residential neighborhood, when the first shot cracked. It came from somewhere ahead, high, sharp, and clean. Then came the second and third, closer. The team snapped into motion. Hawk's fist went up. Everyone dropped, flowing into cover like a single organism. Dust rose in soft puffs from the impact points. Lena's heart didn't spike. Not anymore. Fear came later, if it came at all. In the moment, she went cold and clear. Contact front, Hawk muttered into his mic. A burst of automatic fire replied. Short, controlled, not a spray. Someone out there knew what they were doing. Move, Hawk said. Shift left, we're getting funneled. They moved. A rocket-propelled grenade screamed past, slamming into a building 2 doors down. The explosion punched dust into the air like a living thing. Lena ducked automatically, the concussive pressure slamming into her chest. She tasted grit. Then she heard it, the sound she hated more than explosions. A human sound. A strangled yell. Man down, Dune shouted. Lena didn't wait for permission. She was already moving. The wounded man was Jester. He lay half in the open, half behind a broken curb, his rifle still clutched in his hands like he didn't trust the world to let him go. Blood spread fast beneath him, darkening the sand. Lena dropped beside him, hands already working. Talk to me, she said. Where are you hit? Jester tried to speak, but his voice broke into a cough. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with surprise, like his body had betrayed him. Lena scanned him in a single sweep. Thigh wound. High and ugly. Arterial. Her mind clicked into sequence. Tourniquet. High and tight. No debate. She pulled it from her kit, looped it, cinched it down above the injury, and twisted the windlass until the bleeding slowed. Jester screamed. Not because he was weak, because the tourniquet hurt like honesty. Lena leaned in close. "Breathe," she said. "Look at me. You're still here." Jester's eyes locked on hers. "That was the trick. You gave them something to hold on to besides pain." Around them, Hawk and Rook laid down controlled fire, pushing the enemy back just enough to keep Lena alive. Bullets snapped overhead, shaving the air. "Doc, we have to move," Hawk said, voice taut. "I know," Lena replied. She slapped a pressure bandage into place, checked for additional wounds. None visible. Then hooked her arm under Jester's vest straps. "Can you move?" she asked. "Legs, not cooperating," he rasped, trying to grin and failing. "Then we'll negotiate," Lena said. She dragged him backward, inch by inch, using broken concrete as cover, her boots digging into dust. Jester was heavier than he looked. Everyone was heavy when they were hurt. A round struck the curb inches from Lena's hand. Stone chipped, stinging her knuckles. She didn't stop. Rook appeared beside them like a wall. "I've got him," Rook said. "You've got his shoulders," Lena replied. "I've got his blood." Rook didn't argue. He never did with Lena. They hauled Jester behind a collapsed doorway into a dark interior room that smelled like old plaster and sunbaked fabric. Hawk followed, checking the corners, then sealed the door with his boot against the broken frame. "Status?" Hawk asked. Lena checked Jester's tourniquet again, then his pulse. "Stable for now," she said. "But he needs evacuation." Hawk's jaw tightened. "Air's not coming." Lena didn't ask why. She could hear it in the outside world. The firefight had intensified. The enemy had them pinned in a neighborhood that offered no clean LZ. The city had teeth, and it wanted to keep them. They held that position for 2 hours. 2 hours of constant pressure, of short movements, of bullets and dust, and hot air trapped in rooms with no airflow. The enemy didn't rush them. They didn't need to. They just kept them fixed in place. That was how people died out here, not in heroic last stands, but in slow, accumulating impossibility. By late afternoon, Hawk made the call. "We're pulling out," he said. "We've got what we came for. We cannot bleed the whole team here." Rook nodded, face grim. Jester shifted against the wall, teeth clenched as pain rolled through him in waves. Lena looked at Hawk. "He can't walk." Hawk's eyes met hers, steady, tired. "I know." His silence after that wasn't permission. It was the weight of command. Dune spoke first, quiet and bitter. "We can't carry him through this. Not with the street lit up. Not with their angles." Lena's throat tightened. This was the part civilians didn't understand. The part movies lied about. Sometimes courage wasn't enough. Sometimes you were forced into math. Rook's voice dropped. "Doc, we have to think about the rest." Lena looked at Jester. He was trying hard not to look at her, trying hard to be brave. He swallowed and finally spoke, voice rough. "Don't die for me." The words hit Lena like a slap. Because she'd heard them before. Because the men who said it were always the ones who didn't understand what it did to the person who had to leave. Lena sat back on her heels, hands resting on her thighs. She breathed once. Twice. Then she stood. "Copy," she said, voice calm enough to fool them. "We'll move. I'll stay with him until you're clear." Hawk started to object, but she cut him off with a look. Not defiant. Certain. Hawk's face tightened. His eyes searched hers, trying to find a crack. He didn't. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and reluctant. "We regroup at the old water plant at Grid 4. If you're not there by dawn." "I will be," Lena said. She didn't know if it was a lie, but it was the only kind of promise she was willing to make. They left at dusk. One by one, silent shadows slipping out of the broken doorway into an alley filled with orange light and long shadows. Hawk went last, pausing in the doorway to look at Lena. His voice was low enough that only she heard it. "Angel," he said, "don't be stupid." Lena didn't smile. "I'm a medic. I'm always stupid." Hawk's mouth twitched, then hardened again. He disappeared into the dust. The room went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind that rang in your ears after hours of gunfire. Jester exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the ceiling. They're gone. Yeah, Lena said. Are you crazy? He asked, voice almost gentle. Lena sat beside him and adjusted his bandage. I'm tired, she said. There's a difference. Jester swallowed. His eyes flicked toward the windowless wall. They'll come. Lena nodded. They will. She checked his pulse again. Slower now. Skin cooler. The tourniquet had bought time. Tom was still bleeding. Outside, the city shifted toward night. In the distance, gunfire popped like fireworks. Lena waited until it was fully dark, because the only way out was the old canal, a dried artery that once carried water through the city. Now it carried shadows. And if she could get Jester into it, if she could drag him through the dead channel, under the streets, beneath the enemy's line of sight, she might make it. Might. Lena moved quietly around the room, gathering what she needed. Her kit, a canteen, her pistol, a small flashlight wrapped with tape to dim it. She tightened the straps on her pack until it felt like part of her spine. Then she knelt beside Jester. Listen, she said. This is going to hurt. A lot. And you're going to want to quit. Jester tried to grin. I don't quit. Lena leaned close so he could see her eyes in the darkness. Good. Because neither do I. She hooked her arms under his vest straps and dragged him into the night. The canal entrance was a cracked mouth in the side of a collapsed retaining wall. In daylight, it would have been obvious, an open wound in the city's infrastructure, graffiti and trash and stray dogs. At night, it was something else, a black gap beneath broken concrete, hidden by shadows and the way fear made your eyes avoid places they didn't want to imagine. Lena crouched beside it, listening. Above, the street was quiet, but not empty. You could feel people in a city like this even when you couldn't see them. The air carried tiny signs, a distant cough, a door shutting soft, the scrape of boots on gravel that didn't belong to civilians. Jester lay on his back beside her, breath shallow, jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck trembled. You sure? He whispered. Lena didn't answer with reassurance. Reassurance was a luxury. She answered with truth. No, she said. But it's the best option. She slid her flashlight out, thumbed it on. A weak, taped-down beam cut into the canal, illuminating sand, dried mud, and long trails where water once ran. The walls were stained with old mineral lines, like a record of a life that used to flow here. Now it was empty, which was exactly why it mattered. Lena checked Jester's tourniquet one more time. She didn't loosen it. Not yet. Not here. Not without control. She placed a chest seal on a shallow scrape she'd missed earlier. Not life-threatening, but any open wound in this dust could become something worse. Then she hooked her arms under his vest straps again and pulled. Jester hissed as his body shifted. His injured leg scraped the ground, and his head knocked gently against concrete. Sorry, Lena whispered, even though she wasn't. She dragged him into the canal and felt the temperature drop instantly. The air down here was cooler, heavier, with a sour smell of old water and rust. The city's noise muffled as soon as they passed beneath the lip of the opening. It was like sliding under the surface of the world. They moved in slow increments. Pull, pause, listen, pull again. Lena used her legs, not her back, but her muscles still burned. Jester was a grown man in full kit, and gravity didn't care that she was determined. Every few minutes, she stopped to check him. Pulse, skin color, responsiveness. At first, he stayed with her. He cracked a joke about the smell. He asked if she'd ever thought her life would involve crawling through a canal at night. He told her his mother would kill him if she knew. Lena didn't laugh. She smiled once, briefly, and kept moving. Then his voice started to fade. Not in volume. His mic still picked it up when he spoke, but in coherence. His words became shorter. His pauses longer. His eyes fluttered shut between sentences. Shock was creeping in. Even with the tourniquet, his body was losing the fight against blood loss and cold and pain. Lena pressed her palm against his cheek. Hey, she said firmly. Stay with me. Jester's eyes opened, unfocused. I'm with you. No, Lena said. You're drifting. He swallowed. It's warm. Lena's stomach tightened. Warmth was a lie the dying brain told itself. You're cold, she said. That's the truth. Stay mad about it. Jester tried to grin again and failed. You're terrifying. Good, Lena said. Be afraid of me, not death. She dragged him farther. The canal narrowed. The floor became uneven, littered with debris. Broken pipes, rusted rebar, fragments of old appliances tossed down here by people who used the canal as a trash line. Lena navigated around them carefully, keeping Jester's head from striking jagged metal. Above, a vehicle passed. The sound of tires on gravel echoed through the canal like thunder. Lena froze, breath held. Jester's eyes opened wide for a moment. Voices drifted down. Foreign language, clipped, urgent. Boots. Lots of boots. A search team. They were sweeping the streets. Lena angled the flashlight off and pulled it to her chest, keeping both of them in darkness. The canal ceiling was low in places. If they used flashlights, the beam might bleed through cracks. She waited. The voices moved on, then stopped again, closer. A dog barked, high, aggressive. Lena's blood went cold. Dogs didn't care about night vision or discipline. Dogs cared about scent, and the canal carried scent like a pipeline. Jester's breathing quickened. Lena pressed her hand on his shoulder, applying firm pressure. Don't, she whispered. Not a sound. The barking grew louder. Then the scrape of something heavy above, like a metal grate being kicked. A beam of light sliced through a narrow crack, sweeping along the canal wall. Lena tucked herself behind a protruding pillar of concrete, pulling Jester's body tight into the shadow. Her heart hammered so hard she thought the dog could hear it. The flashlight beam drifted closer. Closer. Then, past them. The dog barked again, but more uncertain now, like it had lost the thread. A man shouted. The dog whined. The flashlight beam lifted, vanished. The grate slammed back into place. Silence returned. Lena didn't move for a full minute. Then she exhaled slowly and felt her hands shaking. Not fear, not exactly. Adrenaline. Reality. She looked at Jester. He was pale now, lips tinged bluish. His eyes half-lidded. Doc, he whispered. Yeah. You could have left. Lena swallowed hard. I know. And you didn't. No. Jester blinked, slow. Why? Lena's throat tightened. She wanted to say because it's right. Because you're my teammate. Because I can't live with it. But the real answer was simpler and uglier. Because if I can't do this, she said quietly, then I don't know who I am. Jester's eyes stayed on hers for a second, then his gaze drifted away, as if the effort was too heavy. Lena grabbed his collar gently. Stay, she said, voice sharper now. You stay? Jester's eyes flicked back. Okay, he whispered, like a child being told a rule. Lena reached into her kit and pulled out a small syringe. Pain control. Not enough to sedate him, but enough to keep him from spiraling into panic. She hesitated. If she gave it now, he might fall asleep. Sleep might turn into something permanent. But pain was burning through him too, and pain was a thief. It stole energy. It stole will. Lena made the calculation she'd made 100 times in blood and dust. She gave a smaller dose. Jester's breathing eased slightly. Lena kept moving. They had been in the canal for over an hour when it happened. A sound that didn't belong. Not footsteps. Not vehicles. Not shouting. A low, distant thump, like a door being slammed hard. Then another. Then a rapid burst of gunfire above. Lena froze, eyes wide. The enemy had found something. Or someone. She forced herself to move faster, dragging Jester with a desperate strength she didn't know she still had. Her shoulders screamed. Her palms burned. She didn't care. All that mattered was getting out of the canal before the sweep tightened and someone decided to flush the rat tunnel with grenades or fuel. She reached an intersection where the canal split, one branch leading toward the old water plant, the other toward a collapsed market district. She checked her mental map. Left. Always left. She followed it, crawling and dragging until she saw the faintest change in air. A whisper of outside wind. An exit hatch. The hatch was half buried under sand and trash, but Lena found the handle and pulled. It resisted, then gave with a harsh scrape that made her flinch. She pushed it up just enough to see outside. Night. Ruined buildings. The silhouette of the old water plant in the distance. No immediate movement. Lena exhaled. Then she heard a sound behind her. Not above. Not outside. Behind. A boot scuff in the canal. Lena's body locked. She killed the light and pressed herself against the canal wall, pulling Jester close. A shadow moved through the darkness. A man. He wasn't using a flashlight, which meant he didn't need to. Night vision. Lena's mouth went dry. The man's silhouette paused, head tilted as if listening. She held her breath. Jester's chest rose and fell in a slow, shallow rhythm. The man moved closer. One step. Two. Lena's hand slid to her pistol. Her finger rested on the frame, not the trigger. She didn't want to shoot in the canal. A shot down here would echo, would call every enemy within blocks. But if he found them, there would be no choice. The man stepped into the faint residual glow from the hatch above, and Lena saw something that made her heart slam. He wore a patch. Not enemy. American. Seal insignia. For a fraction of a second, Lena couldn't process it. Then the man lifted his night vision goggles and hissed, "Angel?" Lena's eyes stung. "Rook," she whispered. Rook crouched immediately, face tight, eyes scanning Jester. Behind him, two more figures appeared, Hawk and Doc, moving fast, silent, breath ragged. Hawk's eyes met Lena's and softened for a split second before hardening again. "You crazy woman," he whispered. Lena couldn't speak. Her throat had turned into stone. Doc slid in beside Jester instantly, hands working like a machine. Okay. Tourniquet's holding. He's borderline." "Angel, you did this alone?" Lena nodded once, unable to explain. Rook grabbed Jester's shoulders. Hawk grabbed his vest straps. "We've got you," Hawk said, voice low and absolute. "We're taking him." Lena blinked hard, the world threatening to tilt. "You came back," she managed. Rook didn't look at her. "We never left you." Hawk's voice was quiet, furious. "We pulled out because we had to. But the second we could turn around, we did." A sound echoed above the canal, shouting. Enemy voices. They were sweeping closer. "Move," Hawk ordered. "Now." They hauled Jester up through the hatch into the night. Lena climbed after them, her hands shaking, her legs weak, her mind struggling to shift from solitary survival back into team movement. Outside, the air felt loud. The city felt awake and angry. In the distance, gunfire crackled again. And somewhere behind them, in the canal's dark throat, the enemy was realizing what had slipped away. They moved fast, but not recklessly. That was the difference between panic and survival. Hawk took point, weapon up, scanning rooftops and windows. Rook and Doc carried Jester between them, his boots dragging, his head lolling once before Doc snapped, "Eyes open, brother," and slapped his cheek hard enough to sting. Lena stayed close. Too close for comfort, some would say, but comfort wasn't on the menu. Her hands never left Jester for more than a second. Every step, she was counting. Pulse, breath, color, time. Time was the enemy now. The old water plant loomed ahead, a skeletal structure of concrete and rusted pipes. It had once supplied half the city. Now it was a graveyard for machinery and a landmark for anyone who knew the area well enough to hate it. Enemy fire cracked from a rooftop 2 blocks away. Hawk signaled right. They cut through a courtyard filled with overturned carts and dead palm trees, shadows stretching long and broken under moonlight. A round snapped off the concrete near Lena's foot. She didn't flinch. She'd learned something during the canal crawl. Fear wasted oxygen. Jester groaned. "Doc." "I know," Lena said immediately. "I know." She checked his tourniquet again, still tight, still doing its job. But his skin was clammy now. and his breathing had turned shallow, uneven. Doc glanced at her, eyes sharp. "We're losing him." "I know," she said again. Hawk looked back. "How long?" Lena did the math in her head. It wasn't precise. It never was. "Minutes," she said. "If we stop, fewer." That was enough. They reached the water plant just as the city seemed to realize what was happening. Shouts echoed closer now. Flashlights cut through alleys like knives. A vehicle engine roared to life somewhere to the east. Rook kicked in a rusted service door, and they piled inside, dragging Jester into the darkness. The interior smelled like oil, mold, and iron. Moonlight filtered through broken skylights, painting the floor in pale strips. Hawk keyed his radio again, voice low but urgent. "Viper 2-1, this is Ghost 6. We're at the water plant. One critical casualty. We need immediate pickup. Static." Then, blessed, fragile sound. "Ghost 6, copy, 2 mics out, hold tight." Hawk closed his eyes for half a second. 2 minutes, he said. "Angel." Lena was already moving. She dropped to her knees beside Jester, ripping open her kit. Her world narrowed to skin and blood and breath. She pulled out a needle, hands steady despite the chaos. "Hey," she said, leaning close. "You're not checking out on me now. You hear?" Jester's eyes fluttered. "Didn't plan to." "That's good," Lena said. "Because I have plans for you." She inserted the needle, started a line with what little fluid she had left. Not enough. Never enough. But sometimes almost was a miracle. Gunfire erupted outside the plant, closer now. Bullets pinged off metal, sharp and angry. "They're pushing," Dune shouted from the doorway. Rook returned fire, muzzle flashes lighting his face in hard bursts. Hawk moved to support, shouting orders, keeping the enemy from collapsing in on them. Lena ignored it all. She leaned over Jester, pressing gauze, whispering words she didn't remember choosing. "You're going to wake up in a hospital," she said. "You're going to complain about the food. You're going to scare the nurses. And you're going to owe me a beer." Jester's lips twitched. 2. 3, Lena corrected. With interest. A round punched through a pipe overhead, spraying dust and rust. Lena didn't look up. She focused on the rise and fall of Jester's chest. Once. Twice. Stay. The helicopter arrived like a god with bad timing. Its rotors thundered overhead, shaking the water plant to its bones. The enemy fire intensified immediately, tracers slicing through the night toward the sound. "Move!" Hawk roared. They lifted Jester as one, carrying him toward the broken loading bay where the rope dropped. The helicopter hovered dangerously low, doorgunner firing nonstop to keep the ground from swallowing them. Rook went first, hauling Jester up with raw strength. Doc followed, hands never leaving the wounded man. Lena started to climb, and felt Hawk's hand on her vest. She turned. "After him," Hawk said. Lena stared at him. "I'm not leaving." "You're not," Hawk said. "You're last. Like always." The building shook as a rocket slammed into the outer wall. Dust poured down like rain. Lena swallowed hard, then nodded. She watched Jester disappear into the helicopter, watched Doc climb in after him. Then she grabbed the rope. Halfway up, a round snapped past her head, close enough to make her flinch. Hawk fired back, screaming something wordless into the dark. Lena climbed faster, muscles burning, lungs screaming. Hands grabbed her at the door, Rook's, Doc's, pulling her in just as the helicopter lurched upward. The city fell away beneath them. The water plant shrank into ruin. The night swallowed the gunfire. Inside the helicopter, Lena collapsed to her knees beside Jester, hands already checking him again. His pulse was weak, but there. Doc looked at her, eyes red, face streaked with grime. "You did this," he said. Lena shook her head. "We did." Doc smiled, tired and real. "Angel." Lena closed her eyes. Not from pride. From relief. Hours later, in a field hospital outside the city, Lena sat alone on a crate, boots still dusty, hands still stained despite repeated washing. Hawk approached quietly. "He made it," he said. Lena looked up, eyes burning. He's alive. Hawk nodded. Surgery went well. He'll walk again. Eventually. Something inside Lena finally broke. She laughed once, sharp, breathless, then covered her face with her hands. Hawk didn't speak. He just stood there, solid and silent, letting her have the moment. When she looked up again, Hawk's voice was rough. "They call you Angel," he said. "You know that?" Lena nodded slowly. "I know." Hawk shook his head. "They're wrong." Lena frowned. "Why?" "Because angels don't bleed," Hawk said. "And they don't crawl through canals dragging grown men who outweigh them." He met her eyes. "You're something else." Lena looked down at her hands. "They're just hands," she said. Hawk smiled faintly. "Yeah. And tonight, they mattered." The silence was louder than the firefight. Lena noticed it first in the hospital tent, sitting on a metal crate with her back against a support pole. The generators hummed, monitors beeped, medics spoke in low, efficient tones, but beneath it all was an absence that pressed in on her ears. No gunfire. No shouting. No urgency clawing at the next second. Her body didn't trust it. She flexed her hands again, rubbing her palms together as if she could still feel the grit of the canal embedded in her skin. Blood had dried beneath her fingernails despite the scrubbing. It always did. Some stains lived deeper than soap. Across the tent, Jester lay motionless under thin hospital lights, tubes and lines branching from him like fragile lifelines. His chest rose and fell steadily now, a rhythm so ordinary it felt miraculous. Alive. That word still didn't feel real. Lena stood slowly, every muscle protesting as if reminding her what she'd asked of it. She walked to his bedside and checked the monitors, not because she doubted them, but because habit demanded it. Heart rate steady, blood pressure acceptable, oxygen holding. She exhaled through her nose, the breath shuddering despite her effort to control it. "You're still a mess," she murmured to him. A nurse passed by, glanced at Lena's posture, and gave her a small nod. Respect. Not for rank. Lena didn't wear it well, but for recognition. Medics saw medics. Hawk appeared at the tent entrance a moment later, ducking under the canvas flap like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "They're moving the team out at first light," he said quietly. "Debrief in the morning." Lena nodded. "Okay." Hawk watched her for a second, then spoke again. "You don't have to stay here." "I know." She didn't move. Hawk leaned against a crate nearby, arms folded. "They're going to ask why you stayed." Lena's jaw tightened. "They already know why. They'll want it explained," Hawk said. "Officially." She looked at him then, really looked. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, etched by the kind of night commanders never forgot. "Did I break protocol?" she asked. Hawk didn't answer immediately. "Yes," he said finally. "Technically." Lena nodded once. "Then I'll say that." Hawk shook his head. "You're not listening. You broke protocol, and you were right." That was harder to carry than accusation. Lena looked back at Jester. "If I'd left him." "But you didn't," Hawk said. "And now he's breathing." The words settled between them. Hawk straightened. "Get some rest, Angel." Lena didn't correct him. Jester woke up 2 days later. He came back slowly, surfacing from anesthesia like someone swimming through thick water. When his eyes opened, they searched the room with confusion first, then focus. The first thing he saw was Lena. She was sitting beside the bed, head tipped back against the wall, eyes closed, arms folded tight around herself. She hadn't meant to fall asleep. She rarely did. Jester cleared his throat. The sound was weak, but it was enough. Lena's eyes snapped open instantly. "Hey," she said, already leaning forward, hands on him. "Easy. Don't try to move." Jester swallowed. "Am I?" "Alive," Lena said. Annoyingly so. A ghost of a smile tugged at his mouth. "Knew it." She checked his vitals again, even though the monitor was right there, even though a nurse was watching from the doorway. Old habits. Comfort habits. Jester's eyes stayed on her. "They told me," he said softly. Lena paused. "Told you what?" "That you stayed." She didn't answer. "That you dragged me through a canal like some kind of lunatic," he continued. That the team came back because you didn't. Her throat tightened. They didn't come back because of me. Jester's gaze didn't waver. They came back because you were still out there. Silence stretched. You didn't have to, he said. Lena finally looked at him fully. Yes, she said. I did. Jester blinked. Why? She searched for the right words and found none that were clean enough. Because we don't leave people, she said. Not when there's still breath in them. Not when there's still time. Jester's eyes shone, not with tears, but with something heavier. Gratitude mixed with the weight of surviving when others didn't always get to. I owe you my life, he said. Lena shook her head. You don't owe me anything. Jester frowned. That's not how this works. Lena smiled, small and tired. Then maybe this once it does. The debrief was clinical. Too clinical. They sat in a clean room with maps on the walls and water bottles on the table, the desert scrubbed from the air by filters and distance. A man in a pressed uniform asked questions in a neutral tone. Why did you remain behind? Why did you attempt extraction alone? Why did you deviate from the withdrawal order? Lena answered calmly. I assessed that the casualty was salvageable. You were aware of the risk? Yes. You understood the likelihood of failure? Yes. The man folded his hands. And you proceeded anyway? Yes. Silence. Then Hawk spoke. She saved his life. The man nodded slowly. That is noted. It wasn't praise. It wasn't condemnation. It was bureaucracy's way of swallowing something too human to digest. That night, Lena stood outside the temporary barracks, the desert stretching out under a sky so full of stars it almost hurt to look at. She leaned against the railing, breathing in air that smelled of sand and fuel and distance. Footsteps approached. Rook stopped beside her, arms crossed. You know, he said, half the team thinks you're insane. Lena snorted. Only half. Rook smiled. The other half thinks you're the reason they'll sleep tonight. She looked out into the dark. I didn't do anything special. Rook shook his head. That's the problem. You did what needed doing. Most people talk themselves out of that. They stood in silence for a while. Finally, Rook spoke again. They'll tell this story. Lena frowned. I don't want them to. They will anyway, Rook said. Because some stories aren't about how hard we hit back. They're about who we carry with us. Lena closed her eyes, letting the desert wind brush her face. Somewhere behind her, in a hospital tent lit by soft machines and quiet hope, Jester slept. And in a city that used to breathe, a dry canal lay empty again, holding nothing now but shadows and memory. Lena returned to the city 3 weeks later. Not to Karbala sector exactly. What was left of it had already been renamed, relabeled, folded into reports that would eventually become footnotes. This was a neighboring district, closer to the river, where the streets were wider and the damage wore a different shape. Here, buildings leaned instead of collapsed. Shops still had signs, even if the glass beneath them was gone. Life tried to come back in pieces. The team moved at dawn, the air cool enough to feel merciful. Hawk led as always, Rook anchoring the rear. Jester wasn't with them. He was stateside now, learning to walk without the weight of memory dragging on his injured leg. Doc joked that Jester would complain more in physical therapy than he ever had under fire. Lena believed him. She walked in her place, off-center, eyes scanning not for targets, but for people. Old habits, different math. Her pack was full again, tourniquets replaced, syringes restocked, gloves folded just the way she liked them. Her hands felt like her own again. The city felt quieter this time. Not safer, just tired. They moved through a market square where the stalls were empty but not destroyed, the fabric awnings tied back as if their owners planned to return any day now. A cat darted between crates, pausing to stare at the armed men and woman with yellow eyes full of judgment. Hawk raised a fist. The team stopped. Civilians ahead, he murmured. Slow. A group of locals emerged from a side street. 2 men, an older woman, a boy carrying a plastic jug nearly as big as he was. They froze when they saw the team, eyes wide, bodies tense. Lena felt the familiar pull in her chest. She lowered her weapon slightly and stepped half a pace forward, open hands visible. She didn't smile. She never smiled in moments like this. Smiles could look like lies. The woman studied her face, then glanced at Lena's medic patch. Her shoulders dropped. The boy took a step closer, curious now instead of afraid. The moment passed. The civilians moved on, hugging the wall, casting backward glances that carried something like cautious relief. Rook exhaled quietly. "That still works," he said. Lena nodded. People know what hands do. Later that afternoon, they took contact. Not heavy, not coordinated. Just a few shots from a rooftop, more warning than intent. Hawk directed the response cleanly. The shooters fled. No pursuit. But in the aftermath, a man lay bleeding near a collapsed doorway. Local, not hostile. Shrapnel wound. Bad, but survivable. Lena was already moving. She knelt beside him, speaking softly in a language she barely knew but trusted anyway. Her hands worked as they always had. Firm, precise, gentle without being slow. The man cried out once, then clutched her sleeve like a lifeline. She tied the bandage, checked his breathing, motioned to Hawk. "Evac," she said. Hawk nodded immediately. No discussion, no hesitation. Rook watched her from a distance, something thoughtful in his eyes. Later, when the helicopter lifted off with the wounded man aboard, Rook spoke. "You ever think about what happens when you're not here?" he asked. Lena wiped her hands on her pants, eyes still on the shrinking aircraft. "All the time." And Rook pressed. Lena thought of the canal, the dark, the weight of Jester's body, the choice she'd made when Math said no. "I think," she said slowly, "that someone else steps up. Or they don't. And that's the difference between a story and a statistic." Rook nodded once. "That's a hell of a burden." Lena met his gaze. "It's not a burden. It's a responsibility." The nickname followed her, whether she wanted it to or not. New operators heard it in passing. Veterans used it sparingly, with a kind of reverence that made Lena uncomfortable. Angel wasn't something you claimed. It was something others said when they didn't have better words. She never corrected them. She never embraced it either. Months later, back home, Lena sat in a quiet hospital corridor waiting for a transport that would take her to another training cycle, another rotation. She wore civilian clothes now, jeans, boots, a jacket that hid the shape of her shoulders. Across the hall, a man struggled with a set of crutches, frustration written all over his face. "Jester." Lena stood before she realized she was moving. He looked up, surprise turning into a grin that was still crooked but stronger than the last time she'd seen it. "Doc," he said, "you stalking wounded people now?" She laughed, a real laugh, short and warm. "You walk like you're trying to start a fight with the floor." "Floor's winning," he said. They stood there for a moment, neither sure what to say next. Finally, Jester spoke. "They told me I'll run again." Lena smiled. "Good. And they told me something else," he added. She waited. "They said when people ask how I survived, I should say I had good training." Lena nodded. "That's true." Jester shook his head. "I'm going to say I had a medic who didn't believe in leaving." Lena's smile faded into something softer. "You can say whatever helps you sleep." Jester leaned on his crutches, eyes steady. "Angel." She sighed. "Don't." He smiled anyway. On her last night before deployment, Lena stood on her apartment balcony, the city below alive and indifferent. Cars moved. Lights blinked. Somewhere, someone laughed. She thought of the desert city that used to breathe, of the canal, of the water plant, of the man whose blood had soaked into her gloves while the world narrowed to inches and seconds. She thought of all the moments no one would ever write down. Lena flexed her hands, feeling their strength, their memory. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't a legend. She was a medic. And tomorrow, somewhere far away, someone would need hands that didn't shake. That was enough. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Epic Recon Stories. Here we tell the missions that never made the headlines, the decisions made in silence, and the people who carried them. More stories are coming soon.